Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and we're back to work on our CP Express and Transport A train. I'm just going to be calling it CP Express from here on in, and if you haven't seen part one, it's going to be a Ford Louisville tractor, painted blue, with a nice simple air deflector on the top of it, and then we're going to have two pups. Those are 27, 28-foot trailers behind it. Most of this is going to be AMT parts. Part one, we modified our hood because this is the long version of the Ford Louisville nose. Although really it's not that long when you figure that the LTL 9000 was probably about this long. And if it was the axle back configuration, I think the nose was even longer. But this is, in fact, the longer version. And if I flip it over, you can see the seam of where I added the distance there. One of the other major changes is the AMT kit, and the one we're using is the Ford Snowplow. It comes with disc wheels, and the particular CP Express truck that I'm modeling had spoked wheels. So I ended up, let's grab it here, going to, if we can try to fit this in here, zoom out. I used my trusty Ford C600 stake truck for the masters for the wheels. And I've used these wheels before as masters. Last kit I used, or the last build I used them for, was my Dodge CNT 900 tow truck, and I'll put a link up here. Maybe, possibly. And I cast those wheels in resin, so I thought, hey, no problem, I'll just do this again. So, here is one of our two front wheels. And you can see it didn't turn out too badly. The green, that's from the Play-Doh that I used to back up the mold. The backs, as usual with my resin wheels, have absolutely nothing in terms of detail, but unless you're picking it up and flipping it upside down, who cares? So these two turned out all right. Now, when I did the Dodge tow truck, I managed to cast all 8 rear wheels from the same mold. Didn't have any problems at all, and I thought for sure there was no way I was going to get that out of one mold. Now, I've been working on these wheels for the last 3 weeks or so. The entire time I was working on the, I suppose 2 weeks. The whole time I was working on the Javelin, plus a little bit in before and a little bit after. So to do even just the front and back in one piece just was not working. So what I ended up doing was I ended up doing one mold here for the basic front tire, one mold for the ring, another mold for what AMT calls the spider. This is basically I think these are Dayton wheels, but basically this is the bit that everything bolts onto. And then this is my backing wheel. And this one is particularly ugly looking. I don't really care that much because you're not going to see it that much. So this goes in here like that. Then that goes on there. And then we put our ring on the front. By the time this is painted up, it should look fairly convincing. So that is going to be our back wheel. So I have one set completely cleaned up and ready to go. I've got another 3 of these wheels to go for or tires to go for the inners. But I don't know what the problem has been. I'm using the same brand of latex to make my molds. I'm using the same sort of resin that I've used before. But getting these out of the mold has just been horrific. Even using the same talcum powder that I've always used before. Literally, I'm lucky if I can get 4 items out of a mold before the mold was completely destroyed. So I don't know what I'm doing differently or what has changed with the resin, but it has not been pretty. So now that I've bored everybody with that, let's get on to building the chassis. And assembly has commenced. Now, it's been a long, long time since I last built this kit. And the instructions, which I don't have hanging up, I have them just kind of perched here. They name the parts, but they don't actually tell you the part numbers. There are part numbers on the parts, but the instructions do not tell you what they are. This is not the end of the world. Anyone who's built a few kits should be able to identify various bits and pieces, but just a word of warning. So, the frame has been started, and I've got the front cross member in, and the rearmost one. I'm going to wait to put this one in until I have both halves of the frame in, because it only makes contact at the top. If we look at this one, this cross member, which is the second one, is also what's going to hold our cab in place. And if you look and see, you can see that there are some molded in guides to tell you where to put it. And you can also see that I have not put it in those spots. And the reason is, recall that our hood is going to be longer because we extended it, which is going to shove our cab back. So I basically measured the piece that I added here, and then I moved our cross member back the same amount. And hopefully that will be close to where we need it. So I took a little bit of a break from working on this, about 3 days. I've got the rear suspension basically assembled. There's a couple of sway bars to go in here. It can be a little tricky, but it does go together. And as I mentioned earlier, they don't actually, the part numbers that are on the instructions don't really correspond to anything on the actual parts trees. Now here we've got the Caterpillar engine, and on my coke truck I painted it blue, basically because I was kind of building that as a early to mid 70s truck. And for the first few years, this Caterpillar engine was actually painted Ford blue. In this case, we're building a truck that was actually built sometime in the 80s. So we're going to be painting this Caterpillar yellow. Now, one thing I had to go and I had to refer to the coke truck, because if I swing us over here, look at the instructions, you can see that they have the air compressor here. They say C, it's a chrome part. Okay, that's fine. So we go on to our chrome sprue, and honestly, there's nothing on there that even remotely resembles it. The only thing that comes even close is this piece right here. And it doesn't look like it does in the picture. So I went over to the coke truck and I took a look at that, and that was the part I used on that one. So it's the closest, so that's what we're going to use. I'm pretty sure it is correct, but most of the parts you can identify by sight, but this one is a little tricky. So more gaps in productivity here. This is almost a week since I last sat down and did anything to this. Basically, I got my front suspension together here and the steering, and then I actually ended up airbrushing this semi-gloss black. I don't normally airbrush frames, mostly because it's hard to get in all the little nooks and crannies and stuff. But it can be quite tedious to paint them as well. But I thought, let's try airbrushing this one, and I did, and it turned out pretty good. Just a little bit right here I need to touch up, mainly because the way it was hanging, as you can see right there, need to touch up a little bit. Mostly, once again, because it was hanging from up here and it was tough to get the airbrush underneath. But I think I saved some time. But basically, I went away for 2 days. And you figure getting ready a couple days before and a couple days after getting settled in, that was probably about 5 days. That wasn't a whole lot of productivity. So we've got the belt assembly here and the engine itself. They have actually been spray painted old Caterpillar yellow. And the fan, I have sanded down or filed down the fan blades to thin those out. So before I mount the engine, I'm going to be detailing up the fan blade assembly here. So here's our engine pre-weathering. These Caterpillar engines tend to basically look like big yellow lumps. I did make a point of painting the oil filters a different color. So this is going to get a coat of Tamiya panel wash just to grimy it up, because we're not building a brand new truck. The transmission was Tester's steel. Here's one of my sets of dual tandems painted up. There's nothing painted in the middle because I still have to put a wheel hub in there. It's going to be a bit of a hybrid between what the kit gives us and what I need to connect to this. This one hasn't been painted yet, mostly because where my front rim mated with the wheel spider there, as AMT likes to call it, there's a bit of a gap. I needed to put some filler in there. That's the gray you can see. And here's one of the fronts. I haven't painted the tread yet, mostly because I want to do a little bit of work on the backside here, just to avoid it from looking like a total cookie. But we're getting close on the wheels. Several not very productive days later, and we have our dual tandems all painted and ready to go here. You can see there's the backside, and that's actually almost a perfect fit over the back of our brakes, like that. That's going to actually put them on slightly too tight, so I'm going to be putting a very small styrene pad in each of these spots right here, just to space them out the correct amount. Cue big sigh. This has been one of these months I just haven't seemed to be able to get anything done. Just getting these little crude-looking blocks here cut and put in place. I don't know. I originally sat down to do that 3 days ago. Finally got it done. These look crude, but you're never going to see them because the wheels go on like that. You can't see them from behind. These backing plates, which I've painted rust because, although they're not the brake drum, they're the backing plate that the brake shoes go on to. That would tend to be rusty from heat anyway. So it just so happens to correspond to the diameter of the inside of my wheel. So you can see there's almost no movement here. These blocks I've already figured out are going to space my wheels out to where they should be width-wise. Like I said, I thought I was going to have these glued on a few days ago. As a matter of fact, I thought I was going to have this episode out probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. Oh well, that's the way it is. This is supposed to be a hobby. It's not supposed to be a job. I already have enough jobs. So, get these glued on in the next couple minutes, hopefully. So I need that little clip from SpongeBob SquarePants where the French dude says 2 weeks later, because really, It's been a week or two since I've filmed anything. The wheels are on. The radiator has been glued in place. Got the drive shaft in place. This has been lengthened slightly. I seem to recall that from previous builds of this kit. The drive shaft always seems to be a little bit off. So I haven't dirtied up the wheels yet. The main thing I want to get done before calling it quits on this particular episode, let's just move here to this lovely full color photograph that I've got sitting here on the back of the workbench, is I really want to get the fuel tanks done before I wrap up this episode. And I don't think I mentioned this in the first episode, but the more I look at this picture, the more I am convinced that this picture was taken in Ottawa, where I was a security guard for CP Express and Transport. The reason I say that is this building here, which I was not responsible for as a security guard, looks like the Canpar building. That's a Canpar truck. This building looks an awful lot like the maintenance facility that was part of my beat. And it's possible this photo was taken sometime within the 2 years that I worked there. Or the 2 years I worked there was in maybe the 5-year span that this photo was taken. But this actually is probably one of the trucks that I used to sit there staring at. I'm starting work now on those fuel tanks. Now, lots of trucks have got squarish, or I should say rectangular fuel tanks. But this particular design here seems to be a Ford option. And basically you've got, it's a long rectangle. There's a step here, and then there's a notch at the back of the fuel tank, and a box sits up in there, and I believe that's a battery box. And basically the fuel tank is the same on either side, only basically mirror imaged. So those are the fuel tanks I want for this. What I plan on using for my fuel tanks is this really, really thick styrene. And the reason for that is when I glue it together, I can round the top corners and give the whole thing the effect of being basically rolled metal. Because even though it's basically a rectangular shape, the top surfaces and the bottom surfaces round over. And, well, you'll see once we get it all together. I've got my 2 outside pieces of my fuel tank cut here. And I've gone and glued a big serious plug of styrene on the inside. Because the real tank has basically a circular pocket inset, and then the bottom third of that has a little plate to act as a step for getting up on the fuel tank. So that'll be the next thing, is drilling that hole and then once again blanking it on the other side here. There's my hole drilled in, and I'm just gonna blank that off, and then later on, once I get the whole tank together, I'll put in the little flat piece that's gonna serve as the step. Okay, they may look a little crude at this stage, but the next step is going to be to basically sand and file them so that they're nice and squarish and everything like that. Then I'm going to fill any gaps. Then I'm going to be rounding all of the corners to make it look like basically it's, they're pressed metal and they're welded together. But almost all the corners are curved on these fuel tanks. So hopefully these are looking a little more crisp. I've sanded off kind of most of the irregularities. Now I've got to basically, any low spots I've got to fill before I start rounding things off. There, I think you'll have to agree, these are starting to clean up nicely. Now they don't have any of those irregularities. Next step will be to round the edges so it looks like they're made out of stamped steel. Well, our step-by-step progress continues. You can see this one, all the edges have been rounded. This one here still needs to be done. So we got another update on our fuel tanks here. We've got the strapping on, and we have the bottom of the supports. Now on the real truck, these are basically kind of a hat. Best way to describe it, kind of a hat channel, and that kind of curves up the backside and goes onto the frame. I created mine using some 90-degree angle. Now that doesn't that doesn't curve very well, so I'm basically just going to be putting a solid piece at the back here because you can't really see it anyway. So the next step I'm going to do is to put our little tread plate step inside there and create the battery box. As well as that, I've got to put a fuel filler cap up here. But it's pretty much looking like I wanted it to. There we go. About 29 pieces of plastic later. This is our fuel tank. Of course, we have the battery box here in the notch. We have the step that's inset into that round area there. We've got the fuel filler cap. On the real truck, this is surprisingly unsophisticated. It's basically just a big brass, cap that screws onto the tank. So you can see the characteristic hat shape of the supports that go underneath and up to the frame. Now, for the backside, I just used some solid pieces of styrene because I want a little bit more strength there. But if we look at it from the end, you can see that it curves up like the real part would. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint the backside here because otherwise I won't be able to get at it. Then I'll glue it on the truck and then I'll paint the rest of it. And this is basically going to be painted semi-gloss black. But we'll get the backside painted before I actually try gluing it on. So, I think it's been at least 6 weeks since our last episode went up. And that was the Javelin. I don't know why I had so very little energy. I was lucky if I worked on this thing for maybe 20 minutes a day, if that. So, the fuel tanks are on. I'm going to give them a coat of black paint. That'll probably be the last thing we do for this episode. So there's my chassis. It's probably about, let's say 85% done. Mostly because I need to put a loop finder in here. One of the other things I want to do, let's flip it over. You can see the brake detail here. These, I believe, are an older style of brake. I have a mold to do the larger pancake style brake cans. I think I'm probably going to switch these out and put those in. But I'm mostly happy with how the fuel tank has turned out on both sides. I'm going to flash up the picture here for a second. As you can see, the truck itself has quite a bit of grime and rust on it. So I'm going to be wanting to replicate that. But I'm happy with where the project is. I'm not happy with how long it took me to get it this far. Like I said, at least 6 weeks since the last episode went up. I apologize if somebody feels annoyed over that, but this is supposed to be a hobby for me and other people. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.